Imagine a friend from Paris standing at the entrance of a Seoul apartment. When the host says, "Please take off your shoes," he looks confused. Now picture a friend from Seoul visiting a friend's house in Paris. When the host walks across the living room carpet with shoes on and sits on the sofa, it's his turn to feel confused. Do you take off your shoes when entering a house? Or do you keep them on? This one small habit contains thousands of years of history, climate adaptation, religious philosophy, social structure, hygiene concepts, and fundamental differences in ways of life. Today we explore the fascinating cultural differences surrounding shoes. The culture of removing shoes when entering a house appears in many regions around the world, but is most notable in East Asia. This is true in Korea, Japan, and parts of China, and the same applies to Thailand, Vietnam, and Indonesia in Southeast Asia. Interestingly, Turkey and Iran in the Middle East, parts of Finland and Sweden in Northern Europe, and Russia, though geographically distant, share the same habit. These regions commonly developed cultural traditions that clearly distinguish between inside and outside. The Korean case offers particularly revealing insights. The key to understanding Korea's shoe-removing culture is a unique heating system called ondol. This technology, originating on the Korean peninsula around the 4th century BCE, is an extremely rare form of floor heating even on a global scale. The principle of ondol is remarkably scientific. When fire is lit in the furnace, hot air passes through stone passages laid beneath the floor, heating the stones. These stones gradually release heat, keeping the entire room warm for a long time. This is completely different from Western fireplaces or Japanese orori, where people gather directly around the heat source. What's interesting is the social diffusion process of this technology. Ondol, which initially was a heating method for the lower classes, gradually spread to the upper classes due to its efficiency and was eventually installed even in royal palaces. Looking at human history, in most cases, the lifestyles of the upper classes spread downward, but ondol went in the opposite direction. This is evidence that the practicality of the technology was so excellent that it could overcome class barriers. The impact of ondol on culture is profound. Since the floor itself is the heating device, people naturally came to sit and live on the floor. A great transformation occurred from chair culture to floor-sitting culture. Because they ate, slept, and lived on the floor, the perception took deep root that the floor is a space that comes into direct contact with the body. If you enter wearing shoes, the floor becomes dirty, and you have to sit or lie on that dirty floor. This goes beyond simple inconvenience to become a direct threat to health. Therefore, taking off shoes became not a choice but a necessity. The Japanese case shows a similar pattern. Tatami, a floor covering made from straw, is very soft, and people sit and lie directly on it. To step on it wearing shoes is unimaginable. Not only would the tatami be damaged, but it would harm the health of people living on it. Climate factors are also important. Korea and Japan have distinct 4 seasons, with frequent rain in summer and snow in winter. If you walk around outside during the rainy season, your shoes quickly become covered in mud. In winter, if you bring shoes with snow and ice stuck to them directly indoors, the inside of the house becomes contaminated in an instant. Thus was born the unique space called the entryway. This is the boundary between outside and inside, and both physically and symbolically. It is the sacred threshold that divides the world from the home. The entryway of Japanese homes is particularly interesting. It is designed one step lower than the main floor, creating a clear boundary. The moment you cross this threshold, you leave the outside world and enter an intimate private space. The act of removing shoes becomes not simply a hygiene habit, but a ritual act of transitioning from the secular to the domestic. In Buddhist cultures, this act takes on even deeper meaning. The reason for removing shoes when entering a temple is the symbolic meaning of leaving the dust of the dirty secular world behind with the shoes. Shoes step on the ground, and the ground contacts all kinds of unclean things. Therefore, shoes became a symbol of secular contamination. Buddhist scriptures contain the teaching to enter the sanctuary with a clean mind. This cleanliness means not just physical cleanliness but spiritual purity. As these religious customs gradually expanded to homes, The notion developed that the home is also a small sanctuary. The Islamic cultures of the Middle East have similar traditions. Removing shoes before entering a mosque is essential, and many homes follow the same rule. This is partly for religious reasons, but there is also the practical reason of not wanting to bring sand and dust. Stuck to shoes indoors in a desert climate. The Scandinavian countries of Northern Europe, especially Finland and Sweden, also have a culture of removing shoes. These regions have long winters with heavy snow. If you enter wearing wet shoes, the floor becomes soaked and the wooden floors are damaged. Moreover, these cultures place great importance on the coziness of home hygge and relaxing indoors in warm rooms. Wearing bare feet or thick socks is at the heart of this. Russia has the same tradition. With its cold climate, muddy springs, and snowy winters, entering indoors. Wearing shoes is unimaginable under these conditions. Instead, a culture of wearing indoor shoes called tapki developed. On the other hand, in North America, South America, and most of Western Europe, it is common to enter the house wearing shoes. There are rational reasons for this that formed over hundreds of years. To understand the historical context, we need to examine European aristocratic culture. Consider the Palace of Versailles under France's son King Louis XIV. This was the pinnacle of 17th and 18th century European culture, and was the model that aristocrats from other countries tried to emulate. Louis XIV began his day with thoroughly planned rituals, from the moment he woke up in his bedroom. In this ceremony called Le Lever, or the rising ceremony, one of the most important moments was when the king put on his shoes. Surprisingly, putting shoes on the king was not a servant's task, but the privilege of high-ranking nobles. Even the act of putting on shoes was a ceremony that indicated the hierarchy of status. Louis XIV himself preferred to wear 12-centimeter high red heels. With his small stature of 156 centimeters, he added dignity with high shoes, and red was a color that only royalty could wear. Shoes were not simply protective gear but a symbol of power. The Palace of Versailles was Europe's largest building, a massive city, where about 5,000 nobles and 20,000 servants lived, with 1,400 fountains, and the Hall of Mirrors decorated with 357 mirrors. But behind this splendor lay shocking truth. Amazingly, the Palace of Versailles had no official toilets. People used portable commodes or relieved themselves behind curtains, or even in hallway corners. Women concealed themselves with wide dresses. Although servants worked hard to clean away the waste, the stench could not be prevented. And this is one reason why the French perfume industry flourished. This also explains why chopines, platform clogs that could reach heights of 15 to 50 centimeters, were popular at the time. They helped people avoid the filth on the floor. Paradoxically, the world's most splendid palace was simultaneously its dirtiest place. In this environment, the perception that the floor is dirty anyway took deep root. The idea of removing shoes was unthinkable from the start. Rather, shoes were necessities to protect feet from dirty floors. Until modern sewage systems were introduced in the late 19th century, the streets of medieval European cities were notoriously filthy. Parisians threw waste from windows into the streets, and excrement and garbage littered the roads. The dominant medical theory of the time believed in miasma, the idea that bad air caused disease. Therefore, the focus was on air quality rather than surface contamination. As a result, the perception that the floor is dirty anyway was further reinforced. Instead, they focused on washing hands, keeping food clean, and frequent ventilation. Architectural structure also played an important role. Medieval European homes were built of stone or wood to withstand cold, damp climates. Floors were hard stone or wood, and most importantly, most of life was conducted on chairs. People ate sitting in chairs and slept in high beds. The floor was simply a passageway for movement, not a space that came into direct contact with the body. When the body is separated from the floor, the cleanliness of the floor becomes relatively less important. Even if shoes dirty the floor somewhat, it wouldn't directly soil clothes or skin. Social aspects cannot be overlooked either. In European history, shoes were markers of status. Medieval nobles strode through castles wearing ornately decorated boots or shoes. The poulain, pointed and elongated shoes popular in the 14th century, indicated status by length. Royalty and high nobility could wear shoes with tips extending 30 centimeters or more beyond their feet, but commoners were restricted to 15 centimeters or less. In the most extreme cases, the tips were so long they had to be tied to the knees with strings to allow walking. This was a declaration that, I am a noble who doesn't need to work. In this context, removing shoes was considered the behavior of lower classes, servants, and slaves. Therefore, wearing shoes even indoors was a social declaration that, I am a person of high status. This notion persisted for hundreds of years and became deeply imprinted in Western culture. Traces remain to this day. This is why dress shoes symbolize professionalism and authority, and why removing shoes in business meetings is hard to imagine. In the late 19th and early 20th centuries, the situation gradually changed as the hygiene revolution occurred. Louis Pasteur's germ theory, John Snow's cholera research, Florence Nightingale's nursing reforms brought a new understanding of cleanliness. However, shoe culture did not change easily. Habits and perceptions formed over hundreds of years do not change with scientific evidence alone. Moreover, the invention of carpets and vacuum cleaners provided a new solution. The mindset became possible that, even without removing shoes, regular cleaning is sufficient. Apart from cultural differences, modern science provides clear answers about shoe hygiene. Research conducted in 2008 by University of Arizona microbiologist Professor Charles Gerba's team showed shocking results. The researchers had 10 participants wear new shoes for 2 weeks and then analyzed the shoe soles and interiors. The results showed that on average, the exterior of one pair of shoes contained approximately 421,000 bacteria, including pathogens such as E. coli, Klebsiella pneumoniae, and Serratia, which cause respiratory and wound infections. Even more surprising is the transfer rate. When researchers had participants step on clean tiles with contaminated shoes, 90 to 99% of bacteria were immediately transferred to the floor. In other words, walking around inside the house once with shoes on contaminates the entire house. These bacteria can survive on hard surfaces for days to weeks. Particularly, Clostridium difficile survives for months in spore form and is resistant to heat, acid, many antibiotics, and disinfectants. In the United States alone, approximately 500,000 infections occur annually, and about 15,000 people die. The risk is greater in households with infants crawling on the floor. Children put their hands on the floor and then put those hands in their mouths. A pathway is created for bacteria transferred by shoes to enter directly into a child's mouth. Due to such scientific evidence, interesting changes are occurring. Recently in the United States and Canada, awareness is spreading to take off shoes indoors. Especially after the COVID-19 pandemic, as awareness of surface contamination increased, many households began practicing shoe removal. According to a 2018 survey by polling organization YouGov, approximately 87% of Americans and 86% of Canadians now say they remove shoes at home. This represents a significant change compared to a decade earlier. What was once considered a strange Asian custom is now being re-evaluated as a scientifically reasonable hygiene habit. Now let's learn about the fascinating story of how Korean ondol, which made people take off shoes and live centered on the floor, became the foundation of modern floor heating. Ondol evolved and spread across borders through unexpected paths, and there is also tragic history intertwined in this. In 1916, world-renowned architect Frank Lloyd Wright (1867–1959) visited Tokyo to design the Imperial Hotel of Japan. At the time, he was deeply grieving after a family tragedy in America. During a cold winter, Wright stayed at the house of Japanese magnate Okura Kiichiro. Okura was a person who had accumulated enormous wealth through business in Korea and collected Korean cultural artifacts. In 1915, he dismantled Jaseondong, one of the buildings of Gyeongbokgung Palace, and reassembled it in his Tokyo mansion. The day Wright arrived at Okura's house was a bitterly cold winter day. While meeting in a tatami room, Wright felt the gentle warmth of the floor even though no heating device was visible. This was the ondol room of Jaseondong brought from Korea. Wright was deeply impressed by this method of heating from the floor without cumbersome heating devices. He regarded this not simply as a matter of equipment but as creating climate and interior space, and recorded this experience in his autobiography. 20 years later, in 1936, Wright met Herbert Jacobs, a young journalist in Madison, Wisconsin. Have you heard of Korean heating methods? Don't you want to be the first American to try such a heating method in a house? Persuaded by Wright, Jacobs agreed, and Wright devised an innovative method of installing iron pipes circulating hot water under a concrete floor. He called this gravity heat. The Jacobs house, completed in 1937, became the world's first modern radiant floor heating house and was inscribed as a UNESCO World Heritage Site in 2019. Wright's floor heating technology subsequently spread throughout Europe, and in 1980, Europe's first standard for floor heating construction was developed. Ironically, Korean cultural property plundered during the Japanese colonial period ultimately became the opportunity to introduce Korean ondol technology to the world. Jaseondong was destroyed in the 1923 Great Kanto earthquake, and only the foundation remained until the cornerstones were returned to Korea in 1996. The boiler hot water heating we use worldwide today is the result of 2,000-year-old Korean ondol principles combined with a 20th-century American architect's innovation. Interestingly, the existence and design of the space called the entryway fully reveals that culture's residential philosophy and worldview. The entryways of East Asia, Northern Europe, and the Middle East have distinct structures. They are not simply doors but separate spaces. They have shoe cabinets, often different floor heights, and are clearly distinguished from the interior. This space is the purifying threshold that divides the world from the home. In these cultures, people feel as if they have truly entered home only after removing shoes. The act of removing shoes itself is a signal of psychological transition. It is an unconscious ritual of, now I put down the tension from outside and have entered my own sanctuary. On the other hand, in many households in North America and Western Europe, entryways are often minimized. When the door opens, it leads directly to the living room or hallway. There is no clear transition space. This reflects the view of the home as an extension of social life. In these cultures, people think, even wearing shoes, it's fully indoors. The home is not a sanctuary separated from the outside world but a living space connected to the world. They value the openness of being able to comfortably receive friends who suddenly visit or delivery people while wearing shoes. Interestingly, hybrid forms are appearing in modern times. Many households in North America, especially Asian immigrant families and families with young children, have adopted the rule of removing shoes. They install shoe cabinets in entryways and prepare guest slippers. In East Asia, as premium flooring and indoor shoe culture have developed, a compromise style of removing outdoor shoes. But wearing indoor shoes is gaining popularity. Especially the younger generation prefers Western-style interiors and furniture while still removing shoes. Whether you should remove or wear shoes, the most important thing is respect for the other person's culture. If the host asks you to remove shoes, gladly remove them, and if they say you can wear them, comfortably wear them. Cultural differences are not a matter of superiority but merely evidence of diversity. Therefore, understanding and respecting that diversity is the proper attitude of modern people living in a global era. Today we have learned about the cultures of removing shoes and wearing shoes indoors. Thank you for watching. Subscriptions, likes, and notification settings give me great strength.